This review was made possible by Kestar24. If you have a movie, TV show, or video game that you'd like me to review, the movie and TV show incentive has been reset, well, at least for one of them. So, if you have something in mind for me to review, go to my Patreon page and make that pledge. Thank you. New request. Wonder what it could be. I could use a palate cleanser. I have to admit, I did not expect this request coming. I mean, I set the bar pretty high with what I would and would not do, so the cynical side of me expected to encounter either the most heinous and balls-crushingly banal material out there. Thomas and Friends caught me by surprise. But the reason behind the request is actually pretty endearing. He wanted to write children's books, and it seems as though Thomas the Tank Engine served as his inspiration. Aww. If I still had a heart, it would be melting right now. Thomas the Tank Engine first appeared in 1946 in a series of books called the Railways series by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry. He used to convey his fascination of the railroad and locomotives to his son and was encouraged to publish his stories in 1945. Strangely enough, Thomas didn't make his first appearance until the second book a year later. Fast forward to 1984, where producer Britt Allcroft approached Awdry about adapting his stories into a television show. For the second time. The show is produced using miniature models on railway sets using fluid motion for the engines and static images for the human characters. I mean, look at them. They're stick people. They're literally wooden. And seeing as how the show has gone on for over 30 years, which doesn't even include the specials and movies that came from it, I decided to only cover the first season, or series, as it's called over in the UK. You guys are weird. Now, to those of you who doubt I could make a review of a children's show vile, offensive, and just plain stupid like what's expected of me at this point, rest assured, I got plenty of good material that I'm just aching to unveil and for you to be promptly disappointed in. This is Thomas and Friends. Every episode, or story as they like to call them, begins with this iconic tune. I hope you like it, because if you choose to binge the entire series in one sitting, you'll hear this song almost 30 times in the span of 2 hours. This song burrows itself into the section of your brain of things that you will never, ever, ever forget. Right above learning how to ride a bike, and right below getting beamed in the face at your brother's Little League baseball game. That's just me? That's actually a true story, though. And now, whenever someone throws something at me, especially at a seemingly high velocity, my first gut reaction is to flinch! But I digress. You'll see in the credits that these stories are narrated by Ringo Starr.
I got blisters on my fingers!
Yes, that Ringo Starr. And I must say, the way he narrates in such a profound and variable voice would make Orson Welles even blush.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine. Edward likes shunting. It was fun playing with trucks. And Gordon would say poop, poop, poop.
Say that again?
Poop, poop, poop.
What was that now?
Poop, poop, poop.
One more time.
Poop, poop, poop.
George was my favorite Beatle anyway. We find ourselves taken to the island of Sodor.
Sodor. Hello?
Dude, did you hear?
Hear what?
PM Rance got lynched for telling the worst joke of all time.
Oh, but oh, fuck that guy anyways.
Yeah, that guy was a dick.
As I was saying, our story takes place on the island of Sodor, whose economy is built on the railroad, which is operated by sentient engines as a means to say fuck you to the anarchist movement that went on strike.
Bow to the people! Eliminate the bourgeois! Communism is the only...
We're treated to the activities of not only Thomas, but also his friends. Hence the name Thomas and Friends. That's the name of the show. Because it had Thomas, which is a train, and he also has friends. They're also trains. Of course you know Thomas, but there's also Gordon, Edward, James, Henry, and eventually Percy. They weren't always friends though, because Thomas was, well, kind of a dick. He starts off as hot-headed and overconfident, but eventually mellows out and becomes more friendly to the other engines due to a series of humiliating failures and mishaps. Which would mean that this program has something that a lot of other modern shows don't: character development. And this isn't just a kids show, this is a kids show. And already it's better structured than Teen Titans Go. But it isn't just Thomas who's a pompous ass. Almost all the engines and anthropomorphic vehicles are salty towards one another.
Look, Coulson boys, there's a new tank engine. Oh, it's only Gordon back to front. Hello, Cole Thomas. Playing tank engines? Sensible engine. Take my advice, scrap your tender and have a nice bunker.
Golden held back the urge to kill, knowing full well he could not get away with murder on account of he's a fucking train. The other engines have their fair share of problems too. Henry is scared of the rain and burrows himself into a tunnel. Gordon is jealous of the other engines performing certain tasks. And the trucks? Well, the trucks are just all around assholes. Nobody likes them. They take orders from the owner of the railroad, known as the Fat Controller. The Fat Controller doesn't fuck around when the engines get too out of line. For instance, when Henry refuses to leave the tunnel, he just seals the tunnel with them inside. When some of the engines have to do work they don't like doing and go on strike, he just piles on more work for them out of spite.
He's like that parent who has the child that doesn't want to leave the toy aisle, so she just threatens to leave the store without him.
He proves not to be totally awful, though. When Henry wants to come back out, the Fat Controller lets him out. Henry says sorry, and he just lets it be water under the bridge, and eventually recruits another engine to help lighten the load. Good on you! Hashtag not all business owners are heartless corporate capitalist pigs. Then it goes on to be business on the railroad as usual. I know this is a fantastical approximation of the actual workflow of what goes in on a railroad, but don't deny yourselves. If you were younger and you saw this, you pictured the trains exploding when they hit each other. Shit, I still do it now. The stories are really short, running from about 6 to 7 minutes each, and much to my surprise, I actually kinda enjoyed watching it. The main reason being is that although this is made for young children, it doesn't patronize them. It has that sense of whimsy and magic, but it also teaches them realistic lessons. Don't be an asshole. You can do everything right and still not have things work out. Being a pansy gets you nowhere. You're gonna get roasted by your peers no matter what you do, so you may as well roll with it and fire back at them in good fun. If you're going to say shit, back that shit up. You become wiser and more experienced from your failures rather than your successes. And most importantly, everyone is useful for something, even if it's not for what they initially thought. I can see why Kestar was inspired by this show. It's fun, it's alluring, and it doesn't bullshit with the subtext. And now for the real reason I like this show. The production design. It's really good. I really like practical effects, and the fact that it was shot using miniatures and models for the longest time is testament to a great production crew. The vehicles all being remote controlled, the facial expressions, the way their eyes roll, close-ups and dolly shots with the camera work. It has a charm to it, despite the way that it also looks primitive. There's no beating around the bush here. This series is over 30 years old. It's aged pretty well, but it's aged regardless. Going back to the human characters, look at them. They're literally stick figures. The biggest illusion breakers are the scenes that included destruction. But it makes sense financially and ethically, seeing how it's a show designed for children. Although it would be funny to feature all the mayhem and gore. Gordon collided head-on into the coaches, killing 7 people and injuring dozens more. Bone and entrails were scattered everywhere. Here's a fun fact. Audrey insisted that most of his stories were based around actual experiences he had on the railroad. Makes you wonder about what aspects of the show are true and what kind of shit he saw. Thomas and Friends became a juggernaut in children's entertainment. You know, just in case you didn't catch on to that. It was ported over to the US under the name Shining Time Station, which was narrated by the likes of Alec Baldwin and George Carlin. No, I'm serious. George Carlin redubbed Ringo Starr's narration from the first 2 series and did the 3rd and 4th on his own. Considering what Carlin is most famous for, it's a pretty weird contrast.
You know something people don't talk about in public anymore? Pussy farts.
It spawned spin-offs, TV specials, movies. The show is still going on today, although it eventually went from practical effects to CG. And the vehicles all got their own voices rather than the narrator doing everything, which I guess makes sense because a show has to evolve and try new things, but I think it also loses its charm while doing so. And you can't say that I'm being nostalgic because I never saw this show until the review, so suck it! Ha! I'm so alone. In the end, I actually enjoyed watching this despite its objective and subjective faults. Ringo Starr's delivery is a bit too dry if you ask me, and the early series are definitely dated, especially if you're watching this in HD. But if you watched this growing up, whether you were in the US or the UK, I hope you think it's held up well compared to what the show is today. If you have kids of your own, I definitely recommend showing it to them. Perhaps even watching it with them because that could be some good bonding tool. Perhaps I'll return to Thomas and Friends on my own volition in the future. At the very least, I'd like to show it to my newborn nephew or maybe even my niece if she's interested. Provided my brother doesn't try to hit me in the face with a baseball again. I'm PM Rants. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna help myself to some biscuits and some chips. Colloquialism humor!
Boo! You stink!
Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I need to give an especially big thank you to Sean Campbell, Sam Peters, Will Stonehouse, Nicholas Blackman, Q-Player, Jackson Smith, Mitch Jackson, Jack Gore, Michael Perry Jr., Ethan Parker, Kodo Sinclair, Bon Lainez, Mario Mariquin, Rodolfo De Lara, you fucking cunt, Ramona Viking Hansen, Cynical Carlos, and Michael Groot. And with that, a pledge is open. So if you guys want to see me review a movie or TV show, consider going to my Patreon page and the link in the description and make the pledge below. Sorry for the delay in videos this month. I've had a bit of a flare-up with my Crohn's disease, but it's calmed down now, but I have had to go to the hospital and get another colonoscopy to do that, but maybe, just maybe, I'll get more into detail in a future video. But until then, have a good day, everyone. This review was made possible by Kestar24. If you have a movie, TV show, or video game that you'd like me to review, the movie and TV show incentive has been reset, well, at least for one of them. So, if you have something in mind for me to review, go to my Patreon page and make that pledge. Thank you. New request. Wonder what it could be. He wanted to write children's books, and it seems as though Thomas the Tank Engine served as his inspiration. Aww. If I still had a heart, it would be melting right now. Thomas the Tank Engine first appeared in 1946 in a series of books called the Railways series by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry. He used to convey his fascination of the railroad and locomotives to his son and was encouraged to publish his stories in 1945. Strangely enough, Thomas didn't make his first appearance until the second book a year later. Fast forward to 1984, where producer Britt Allcroft approached Awdry about adapting his stories into a television show. For the second time. The show is produced using miniature models on railway sets using... I could use a palate cleanser. I have to admit, I did not expect this request coming. I mean, I set the bar pretty high with what I would and would not do, so the cynical side of me expected to encounter either the most heinous and balls-crushingly banal material out there. Thomas and Friends caught me by surprise. But the reason behind the request is actually pretty endearing.